education, integration, diversity, equality. These are the fundamental ideals of democracy, and one woman helped build them into the foundation of today's American society. Jane Addams. Beginning with the strong aspiration to change the growing economic disparity and poor standards of living around her, Jane Addams led an industrial America towards social justice and opportunity for men and women during a time of progressive change. Becoming one of the most beloved women of our country, her work left an indelible mark in America's legacy. The turn of the 19th century was a time of immense industrial change and expansion for the United States of America. Technological innovation helped many cities become booming commercial centers, especially in Chicago. Chicago was quickly becoming a prosperous world city. However, the huge influx of immigrants seeking jobs and unsanitary labor conditions were leading to a growing disparity between the wealthy and the poor, creating unrest in the growing city. It was during this time of change that Jane Addams was born on September 6, 1860, in the small town of Cedarville, Illinois. As a young woman wanting to further pursue her education, Addams attended the Rockford Seminary School, where among her peers, Addams formed many of her early ideals on helping the poor and a woman's role in society. In the summer of 1888, on a tour of Europe, Addams and her friend Ellen Gates Starr visited Toynbee Hall, a settlement house in the East End of London. Here, Addams encountered many of the similar urban problems she had seen in Illinois. However, at the settlement house, Addams was delighted to see the interaction of the educated middle class helping the less fortunate come out of poverty. She said, "It is so free of professional doing good, so unaffectedly sincere, and so productive of good results in its classes and libraries that it seems perfectly ideal." Enchanted, Addams realized that there were some needs to be met back in her own home, and she was met with a burning desire for social reform in the rapidly expanding state of Illinois. Inspired by the work of Toynbee Hall, Addams and Ellen Gates Starr decided to rent a giant house from former resident Charles J. Hull in one of the poorest neighborhoods of Chicago. On September 18, 1889, the Hull House was founded, with the goal to provide a center for higher civic and social life, to institute and maintain educational and philanthropic enterprises, and to investigate and improve the conditions in the industrial districts of Chicago. The Hull House settlement, surrounded by Italian and German immigrant societies, provided many facilities, including a gymnasium, musical concerts, and education and fine arts, as well as collaborations with libraries and art exhibits, alluring the elite class and offering a diversity of opportunities for the immigrant class. The Hull House also helped educated middle-class women find purpose as they taught the first kindergarten classes for children and courses in the evenings for adults. By the time of its second year, the Hull House was rapidly becoming popular, and it became a platform for lectures from famous figures such as suffragist Susan B. Anthony, architect Frank Lloyd Wright, and philosopher John Dewey.
First of all, that very much she wanted to promote what she considered to be cross-class connections. So she sees Hull House on the one hand as fulfilling the needs of women of her class, and of her class also in particular, again, to not feel aimless and purposeless in the world. And then on the other side, initially she sees herself as meeting the needs of the people in the neighborhood, but initially she conceptualizes those needs primarily in spiritual and cultural terms.
However, in 1894, the Pullman strike would bring a new light to the ideas of social reform. In response to wage cuts, workers of the Pullman Company formed unions, and in May 1894 struck against the company in the first ever company-wide strike. In an effort to bring the community back together, Addams led several negotiations, and she felt the growing hostility between the upper class and the workers, later writing that, during all those dark days of the Pullman strike, the growth of class bitterness was most obvious. This class division helped her in becoming more convinced with a classless democratic society, fueled by common beliefs. More importantly, she also became aware of removing moral absolutism. She wrote that life teaches us, and she emphasized the idea that beliefs and morals could change over time as hers did when she had seen the plight of the workers.
In a sense, it radicalized Addams. It caused her to realize that union organizing was absolutely essential, that the workers were right, they had to get higher wages. She had been sort of a dreamy idealist about social issues before that. This deepened her sense that politics and the reforms possible through legislation were essential.
Even though her vocal support for the workers had gained criticism amongst the upper class, she continued to pour her efforts towards expanding the settlement to include her new philosophy. She opened the Hull House to gatherings and labor unions so workers' voices could be heard. Believing that education and safe working conditions were the true gateway to opportunity, Adams, as well as other residents such as Alice Hamilton and Julia Hathrop, lobbied local and state governments to pass reform legislations. By pressing legislatures and local officials, Illinois soon passed child labor laws and compulsory education laws between 1890 and the early 1900s, protecting women and children. Along with Chicago's Women's Club, Adams aided in creating the first juvenile court in the nation, and also commissioned for the construction of playgrounds and kindergartens throughout Chicago to promote an enriching environment for children. The First World War in 1914 sparked strong feelings of nationalism towards defending America. However, Adams, a strong pacifist, voiced her opposition to the war and joining the conflict. She traveled throughout Europe with Aletta Jacobs and Rosa Giannoni, proposing mediation plans with other countries. She established the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom in 1919 and was elected as president in 1922. She published what she considered her best work, Peace and Bread in Time of War, a compilation of her speeches that portrayed her views of toleration and nonviolence as the road towards peace and justice. However, her unyielding views on pacifism drew criticism from politicians and patriots. She was called the most dangerous woman in America. As the war ended, Adams promoted her principles of dynamic pacifism that would help genuine evolutionary democracy, that would expand to meet the constant growth of human needs and relationships. On December 10, 1931, she received the Nobel Peace Prize along with Nicholas Murray Butler for her efforts and dedication to the pacifist movement. Jane Addams defined a new meaning for democracy and challenged the borders of community life in America during an age of progressive change. Addams left two main legacies that helped shape American society. The first was her impact on the lower class and women during her time at the Settlement House. Addams imparted the ideal of the upper class helping the less fortunate, leading not only to a mutual benefit, but also a mix of cultures and values to form the true harmony Addams strived for. Her efforts have reached today's less developed areas, such as Africa, where many education programs try to provide better opportunities for children. As a frontrunner for not only education but also women, she led the way for figures such as 17-year-old Pakistani activist Malala Yousafzai, the youngest ever Nobel Prize laureate. Today, education and labor rights are factors we take for granted, helping ensure that America's growing middle class has fair working conditions and millions of classrooms around the country to provide enriching environments for the next generation. Her second and less tangible legacy is her philosophy on social democracy, existing under the foundations of equality and justice for the less fortunate, and peace and prosperity as a key towards progress. She sparked novel ideas for what it meant to have an economic and culturally diverse community exist together under one roof, an idea that is prevalent all throughout America today, as men and women come together to work, learn, celebrate, and live in harmony. She displayed what leadership looked like in a progressive America, someone who was thinking and constantly evolving in ideologies coming from wide experience that was carefully interpreted. This standard for a leader has promoted the concept of diving in firsthand to make a mark in the world. Forging a new path, Addams had been a shining voice for the people of America, and that voice continues to illuminate brightly today.
Her name, because she was famous and important, her name as a member of an organization was very prestigious. Also the ACLU, which is the American Civil Liberties Union, she was a member of a lot of organizations, and her name was prestigious in drawing other people to that organization.
True peace is not merely the absence of war, it is the presence of justice.